Coming up on Network Africa, Burkina Faso military leader Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba sworn in as the country's transitional president. Somali capital hit by explosions and heavy gunfire in the capital Mogadishu, at least 5 people killed. Plus, Zimbabwe reopens land borders after long COVID closure. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Burkina Faso military leader Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba has been sworn in as the country's president just over 2 weeks after soldiers ousted President Roch Kabore in a coup. The military leader of Burkina Faso, who took control in a coup 3 weeks ago, is now Burkina Faso's transitional president. Dressed in camouflage, Henry Damiba vowed to uphold the constitution in a small ceremony in the capital. Lieutenant Colonel Damiba led army officers to oust the elected head of state, Roch Kabore, last month, angry at his handling of a jihadist insurgency. The military say it will restore constitutional order, but has not given a timetable back to civilian rule. We'll have more on that, but in the meantime, at least 5 people have been confirmed dead and more than 16 others injured during coordinated attacks by Al-Shabaab Islamist militants on the outskirts of Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Police say the early morning attacks targeted police and checkpoints. The Al-Qaeda-linked group said it was behind them, saying their fighters overran government bases and seized military vehicles and weapons, but the claim could not be immediately verified. The attacks happened as the country holds much delayed indirect parliamentary elections. Last week, at least 6 people died and several others were injured after a suicide bomber targeted a minibus full of delegates involved in the country's ongoing elections. In the meantime, the special representative of the Secretary General for Somalia, James Swan, is calling on the electoral bodies as well as Somalia's political leaders to quickly conclude the parliamentary polls, while acknowledging the progress towards finalizing the elections, which are now overdue by over 12 months. Mr. Swan says he's hopeful that the country will make further progress in these areas in the coming months and beyond.
Call on the electoral management bodies, as well as Somalia's political leaders, to accelerate and quickly conclude the elections for the House of the People. Al-Shabaab continues to pose the major security threat in Somalia. Political divisions and prolonged delays in the elections have allowed insurgent forces to make some recent gains. The humanitarian situation in Somalia remains extremely dire, with 7.7 million Somalis requiring humanitarian assistance in 2022. Somalia is the most severely drought-affected country in the Horn of Africa, with 4.3 million people impacted and more than 270,000 people newly displaced due to drought. With the next rains in April likely to be the 4th below-average cycle, Somalia is facing a potential humanitarian catastrophe.
Well, still in Somalia, the country is suffering one of its worst droughts in recent times. UNICEF is also warning that 1.4 million children, nearly half of the country's under-5 population, are likely to suffer from acute malnutrition, out of which 330,000 children will require treatment for severe acute malnutrition. Addressing reporters in Geneva, UNICEF's communication chief in Somalia says funding is immediately needed to procure nutrition supplies and avert debt.
The time to act is now. And when the international community waits until a famine is declared, as we learned from 2011, that's probably a bit too late. A lot of the mortality happens before the famine is declared. And of course, we know that when you begin to see malnutrition go up, and then that is compounded by an outbreak such as measles or cholera, mortality very, very quickly escalates. Somalia is the most affected, with about 90% of the country undergoing the severe drought. And data that was released last week shows that about 4.1 million people in Somalia will need urgent humanitarian support. And that is a quarter of the entire population of 16 million. 1.4 million children are likely to suffer from acute malnutrition. And of those, about 330,000 require treatment for severe acute malnutrition.
Well, let's head back to the situation in Burkina Faso now. Joining us on the program is Aleister Wilcox, an African affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. With the inauguration now of the transitional leader, a military man who forcefully took power in January, what's next? What do you make of this recent development?
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. It goes to show the fact that the military juntas have already dug into governance of Burkina Faso. Maybe they consider ECOWAS' reaction as just normal noise-making, which for me, it has always been a noise-making situation. It will not be unlikely that the military juntas have some backing from the West, and so they can call the bluff of the ECOWAS leaders, ECOWAS sub-regional group. So as far as I'm concerned, they have dug in, and which I said earlier when I appeared on your program, that these days the deterrent for coup is no longer there. And anybody can be adventurous in any of these smaller countries, especially the smaller countries. Remember, after Burkina Faso, there was a failed one in another smaller countries. And we are going back to the same circle. And for there to be a ceremony whereby the military junta will install himself as president without any transitional program, so to say, install himself as president, and it means he's already getting the support of his people, and whatever ECOWAS does or whatever anybody says around the West African region is just a matter for another day, and nothing much can be seen to be done at this point.
But really, what can ECOWAS actually do, though? There's been bans, there's been sanctions. But as, you know, coups continue to happen, is sanctions and bans the answer to this?
Well, sanctions and suspension from the group is just a face-saving measure by ECOWAS. Like I said, ECOWAS has no response mechanism to military incursion into leadership in the West African region. ECOWAS has no clear-cut response other than the normal rectories of ban, suspension, sanction. Sanction against who or against what? For there to be, I mean, it wasn't ECOWAS making that coup became something of the past in Africa, but it was a concerted world effort, right from the United Nations, EU, and other multilateral agencies that put their foot down and said no. And except ECOWAS is able to rally around to get other world powers to be and to bring these issues clearly, I fear that the days of military incursion back to politics, especially in the West African region, is becoming real. My fear now is for smaller countries such as Liberia, Gambia, Mauritius, all those smaller countries. Sorry, I say Mauritius, all those smaller countries that are within the West African region. Because right now, the success rate of this coup plus is very high. And so with this success rate being high, there are other people that will be waiting in the wings and say, so nothing will happen. We can go ahead and do what we want to do, and then nothing will happen. So right now, ECOWAS needs to get support from AU, from UN, from EU, and from other world powers, because that is the only way that there could be real deterrence, not just by mere suspension or mere rectories. It's no longer working. Right. We've seen four West African countries right now under, that have been removed from the democratic a world into a dictatorial world, and it can still be counting. So there must be concerted effort from other world powers, and except, of course, where other foreign powers have interest, then we'll have a bigger issue coming up on our hands. But as far as now is concerned, ECOWAS seems to be a toothless bulldog, and quite unfortunate.
All right, then, African Affairs analyst Mr. Aleister Wilcox, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure to have me. Thank you very much.
And moving on now, the United States has welcomed the lifting of the state of emergency in Ethiopia and has called for the release of detainees. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said lifting the emergency is another important step. Ethiopia's government is paving the way for a peaceful resolution of the ongoing conflict. Mr. Price is now urging the release of all individuals arrested or detained without charge under the state of emergency. The emergency decree was passed in November last year for 6 months as an alliance of rebel forces, including the Tigray People's Liberation Front, advanced towards the capital, Addis Ababa. The 6th edition of the multilateral engagement with EU and African Union head of state and government will hold on February 17th and 18th, 2022 in Brussels, Belgium. The summit is expected to present opportunities to lay foundations for a renewed and deeper AU-EU partnership with the highest political involvement and based on trust and a clear understanding of mutual interest. African leaders, including Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari, are expected to take part in discussions at the two-day conference. And joining us now for what to expect from the summit is Tony Dauda, a youth activist. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Well, as a youth activist, what role would you say youths are playing at this summit?
Well, so we've been trying to engage as much as we can for the summit, but unfortunately, youth will not be physically present at the summit itself. So what we've been doing as youth in the past few days, upon the coming of the summit, we've been engaging with influential decision makers that we know are going to be present at the summit, and we've been pushing forward our own priorities. And essentially, this is how we've been engaging, and the role we've been playing so far has a lot to do with organizing the different priorities from different youth from Europe and Africa, and making sure that these priorities are sent across to the leaders in this summit.
Well, how do you expect these summits to impact on leaders' decision of youths in Africa, where you have a teeming population of young people on the continent?
Well, for one, I would say that it is an opportunity for the leaders to really get to know what the young people want. It would have been better if the young people were given the opportunity to be where these decisions are going to be made, and to state clearly what they want and be part of the negotiation process for the partnership of AU and EU. But then I think that more of what the situation is right now is basically just to get some people representing the youth at the summit and make sure that they get across our priorities.
Okay, in your opinion, how can African leaders leverage on the opportunities that the summit provides for development?
I think that African leaders can leverage this opportunity by making proper negotiations. So far, we do not think that the partnership between the AU and EU is equitable. This summit gives them a chance to renegotiate the terms of this partnership and make it more equitable. And I think that having such an opportunity after waiting for 2 years is such a great opportunity. I would really expect the leaders to take into consideration the final outcomes of the joint youth report, which was prepared this week by youth representatives from both continents, Africa and Europe, organized by the European Union Commission to take those outcomes into consideration as they make this negotiation.
All right, then, youth activist Tony Dauda, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you so much.
And still to come on the program, 49-year-old Rwanda female coach encourages women to take interest in sport. More details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Zimbabwe has reopened its land borders to travelers who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or test negative for the coronavirus. It follows a decline in the southern African nation's daily infection rates. Zimbabwe closed its border crossings in March 2020. They were briefly reopened in December for non-essential travel that year, but that led to a surge in cases. Now only lorries and trucks carrying essential cargo into the landlocked country and returning citizens have been permitted in by road over the last 2 years. Joining us now is Nigel Yamachumbu, Zimbabwean journalist, for more on the situation. Nigel, tell us about the reactions at this time to the reopening of the land borders.
Well, the opening up of the borders after such a long time is certainly welcome, given the standing of Zimbabwe, particularly within the regional context, where the majority of our population is based in South Africa, is based in Botswana and other neighboring countries. And obviously, the cost of flying is much higher, and that had caused quite issues within the borders, where there was now corruption and so forth to let people in, and because naturally people would still want to find ways to be with their families and so on. But now that this long closure has been lifted, this will certainly
It does seem we've lost connection there with Nigel. We will try and reconnect to continue the discussion. But in the meantime, gender-based violence is one of the most critical threats to the protection and well-being of women and children in South Sudan. Well, before that report, here we have Nigel back with us. Nigel, if you can just finish on your thought, please go ahead. We do apologize for the connection issue. Now to South Sudan, as we mentioned earlier. GBV was already rife prior to the conflict in the country. And now UNICEF says it's now nearing epidemic proportions. Well, to help put an end to this, the UN mission in the country has held a conference on keeping women and girls safe.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, held a 3-day workshop in the country's capital, Juba, to address ongoing violence against women and lack of female personnel in the security sector.
We started these workshops last year, and their aim is actually to bring experiences from other countries here to our local counterparts in South Sudan. So basically, we have gathered several soldiers from UNMISS force, and in the next 3 days, they will present their countries, present their armies, and share their experience focusing on gender equality and response to gender-based violence.
We have gender-based violence has continued to be a major factor across South Sudan, preventing women and young girls from fully enjoying their rights and freedoms.
Many perpetrators do come from security sector, Many of them wear uniforms. And that's why we have these targeted workshops where we are speaking about gender equality and response to gender-based violence. Idea is that they will go further, and whatever they learned today here, that these officers will also relay to their colleagues in the field. So the overall aim is to reduce gender-based violence committed by people who wear uniforms.
The sessions brought together uniformed personnel from the South Sudanese military.
For this workshop, we are getting a lot of benefit from it, because before, the girls in uniform, they were really very vulnerable, but now they are confident. They know their rights, they know what they are doing, they know where to go.
In the past, similar workshops have been held with the country's police service. The workshop aimed to raise awareness among both civilian populations as well as law enforcement personnel tasked with protecting them on the safeguards available for women who have survived any form of sexually motivated violence.
Algeria's president says the government will introduce unemployment benefits for young adults as the country struggles with high rates of joblessness. President Abdelmajid Tebboune says the payments to job seekers aged 19 to 40 would begin in March. Those who are eligible will be able to collect the payments of about $100 a month, as well as some medical benefits until they find work. Making the announcement, Mr. Tebboune says that Algeria is the first country outside Europe to introduce such a benefit, adding that there are now more than 600,000 unemployed people in Algeria. Work is underway to expand the two-way section of the Suez Canal in Egypt to 82 kilometers from 72. The Suez Canal Authority Chairman Osama Rabiei spoke at the first news conference to give update on the expansion that began last year. He says it would be too expensive to widen the entire length of the link between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Global shipping traffic was disrupted last year when one of the world's largest container ships got stuck in the southern section of the 190-kilometer canal for about a week. Rabiei was speaking on a dredge north of Suez, about 2 kilometers from the location where the container ship, the Ever Given, got stuck in March 2021. He says the aim of the work is to increase traffic safety and that transit time to pass through the canal will remain at 11 hours. And our 49-year-old Kayitesi coaches AS Kigali, one of Rwanda's top women's soccer teams. She considers her coaching profession as any other profession, as she encourages young women to take interest in sport while also staying focused to school. Take a look.
At a sharp whistle from Rwandan soccer coach Egidi Kayitesi, her players change their practice drills. The team splits into pairs, some kicking the ball and others throwing it. Kayitesi coaches AS Kigali, one of Rwanda's top women's soccer teams. She got her coaching certificate in 2002 and her first job 2 years later.
What motivated me to become a coach was the government's policy of encouraging women to take an interest in sports, especially soccer. The women who were high up in the government were leading by example on the field, and we were following. So I became a coach.
AS Kigali Group has recently come into the spotlight after Rwanda's Salima Mukasanga made history as the first female lead referee of an African match last month. Kayitesi was in charge of Mukasanga's team when she was a youth player.
I consider the coaching profession as any other profession. Only I have found that in soccer, you have to invest in it, love it, and persevere in improving your knowledge and techniques to make a difference in your coaching career.
Kayitesi's love for soccer started when she played for Ikipe ya Kimuhurura, another local team, in 2001. She was its captain for 2 years. She also uses her coaching skills to encourage young women to stay in school.
Each player is free with our coach. She's a woman like us. She understands all the difficulties we can have. I can't say anything to a man, but with Egidi, I consider her as our mother outside soccer. She gives us advice on social life.
During her 3 years as a coach and manager at AS Kigali, the team has won 3 championship cups. They are presently 4th in the Rwandan Women's League.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shibowale.